Dan from the Nostalgia Test podcast. Just wanted to give you a heads up that this episode deals with conversations on sexual violence and rape, gun violence, and racial violence. Thank you.
On today's episode, we welcome Dr. JL to put the 1995 American drama Higher Learning to the ultimate test, the Nostalgia Test. One's primary purpose at university level is to learn how to think. Hey everyone, welcome to the Nostalgia Test podcast, the podcast where Manny and I put our pop culture to the ultimate test to see if it's still good, just nostalgic, or maybe we just have to put it away with movies like Airheads, Blink-182's album, Take Your Pants Off and Jacket, and the Three Musketeers candy bar. Sometimes you just got to put those things away. But I'm your host, Dan Dissinger, here in LA. And I'm here with my longtime friend and co-host, Manny Coelho on Long Island there. Manny, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. I mean, we got a hybrid today, Dan.
Sort of.
You didn't do the intro this way, but
no,
there is a 101 part of this test.
Yes.
So like you're taking me to school, and what better way to go to school but with the movie from 1995, Higher Learning.
Yeah, and we're here. We got a great guest here. We have Dr. JL here. I met you at the Southwest Popular Culture Conference. If everyone could go and listen to the episode of that live presentation, and it was so fun to have people talking about podcasting, but also we talked about certain movies that we wanted to have, that you asked if we've done any hood movies or anything that had to do like Boys in the Hood or anything. And I was like, well, we have to have you on definitely to bring us through them as well. And you, when I got in touch with you, you said you wanted to do Higher Learning. And I was like, let's go for it. Let's do Higher Learning. But yes, everybody, we're here with Dr. JL. Thank you so much for being here.
Yo, I'm so happy to be on the Nostalgia show, man. This is super dope. My name is Dr. J.L. Adolph, better known as the excellent professor of Dad Cypher Edutainment, where I talk about hip hop and writing as a therapeutic process. And that's what I do with Dad Cypher Edutainment. I'm excited because Higher Learning is really super dope because it adds, a lot of elements of like hip hop culture, but yet it is so West Coast because it's created by the late great John Singleton.
Yes.
And it's semi-based on his experiences at USC.
I know.
So I am excited about this. This is about to be a bomb show. Y'all click and subscribe and let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So it's 1995. Higher Learning comes out. Just a little bit about Higher Learning. If people have never seen it, go see it. Get it, watch it, do what you got to do. Higher Learning, 1995 drama written and directed by John Singleton. And yeah, you're right. Based on an experience that he had at USC, school that I teach at. Totally makes sense. When I heard that, I was like, yup. A lot of things at USC, we can get into. You can also listen to my other podcast, Writing Remix, and we talk about USC there. It's an ensemble cast that has some of the most recognized actors and actresses: Omar Epps, Christy Swanson, Michael Rappaport, Regina King, Ice Cube. I mean, the list goes on. Busta Rhymes is in this. Oh God,
Lawrence Fishburne.
I mean, there's who else? Cole Hauser, who's on Yellowstone now. Tyra Banks in her debut movie, and Jennifer Connelly as well. I mean, this is a huge movie. This was I don't know what else to say about it, but we are going to jump into it. But we usually ask, like, do you remember the first time that you saw this, to kind of get like a baseline? So do you remember the first time you saw this, JL?
Yes, I do. I graduated in high school, dated myself in 1994. And so this came out the exact year after. I remember I had to go and see this because Singleton had dropped Boys in the Hood and Poetic Justice.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this was his third film. And I was like, okay, I'm a young man. I'm stepping into college for the very first time. And so this was it. it was really opening my eyes to the entire experience and what that was like. It definitely, and it like so much, I identified so much with Fudge as a character, which was Ice Cube character. And, I had a lot of friends that were like Malik, who was played by Omar Epps. And so, when you have like, I'm leaving the inner city life and transitioning into this sort of college environment. So for me, it just really, it brings me back to that time in my life. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Manny, do you remember the first time you saw this?
No, I remember seeing it. I don't think I've ever seen this movie in full. And I remember like, not that I didn't like this movie. I don't know why I don't remember watching this full movie, but I do remember it being like a very impactful movie that a lot of people talked about. Like when people watch it, it was like, because we didn't have internet, like internet wasn't a big thing then. We didn't have social media. And like, this was the water cooler talk. Like people talk like, yo, that was crazy. Michael Rappaport was crazy. Like, this is like a breakout role for him. He's so young in this movie.
Yeah.
I forget how loaded this movie was with everybody in it. You're like, wow, these people were stars. Like they became a lot of these people you've seen in many other movies.
Yeah.
I couldn't even like, we usually bust on movies here. We joke around about things. We kind of like make fun of certain things that were during that decade that it came out and stuff. And there's definitely some plot holes here and certain storylines that I don't understand why we're in there. But what's crazy is that I don't want to like bring a downer to it, but the fact that like this movie was ahead of its time. Like, you didn't know this was going on if you lived in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
Right. You only found this out when you went to college. Now we know this happens because of social media.
Yeah.
All the time. And the saddest part about it all, it's still fucking it's still fucking happening.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because you're like, holy shit. No, like now it's out and about of all the things, all the problems, all the issues that were going on, inner issues, sexual issues, sexual identity issues, race issues. Like growing up on Long Island, I didn't know like the Confederate flag was and people like that being such a big thing, even though Long Island is known for all that. And I found that out later on. It's just that wasn't a thing. Like, so this is the movie you went and you found this out and you're like, oh, it's just a movie. So I think even back then, maybe you didn't take it as serious. And now you're like, oh shit. Like, it's still around. It's still around. Which is like, I don't want to skip to the end, but like the end when it says unlearn, right? Have we?
No.
No, absolutely not.
That message alone was crazy. It's like unlearn. Like the director was telling us, unlearn our shit because all the shit that we're learning is just making us go back into the cycle and the cycle, and we're in that. So like, it was heavy. I remember like this one was heavy, and I think it was fantastic. Again, there's parts that were overacted. There was parts that I was like, wait a minute, why does this have to be in here? Has nothing to do with the base of the storyline. But then I'm like, but it is a college movie. And it's also trying to tell you like, yo, this is what happens in college. Like the woman who gets sexually molested and now she's like with another woman, but also with the man. And she's kind of like experimenting. I'm like, what is this scene all about? Like, and then I'm like, it's kind of taken away from the major thing that's happening. And then I'm like, but maybe it was needed.
Well, I think with her, Christy Swanson's character, I mean, she's raped by that guy, Billy, which Billy, no justice comes to Billy at all.
No.
Which is, but I think also in the 90s, especially 1995, you're like, sexual politics is huge. And then the idea that you have a possible, not named, not even said bisexual character, that's in the 90s, that's really
true.
I say no one's talking about that because no one can even get over the idea of like someone is gay or lesbian. So you have a character that's bisexual, that was totally out of the ordinary. I mean, I remember seeing this movie and it blew me away. And I saw it several times after that. This comes out the same year too that movie Kids came out. So you have Higher
Oh,
Learning and Kids both come out in 1995, and like so, it's such a year for these types of films, and it makes sense because the 90s were very hot. The 90s were heated with these issues, and then it kind of, not that they go away, but distractions in people's lives and whatever, and then all of a sudden it kind of comes to a boil again, right? So
right.
yeah, this movie was quite impactful when I saw it again.
And don't forget, this is shortly after the LA riots and that sort of thing. We're talking about like Rodney King and all of that sort of thing. And then the release of Spike Lee's Malcolm X film. So you definitely have that sort of charged Black nationalism that's coming out of this time period. And what's so funny when I look at this film, I think this is like 4 years before Columbine takes place, which is, and you'll find out why that point is relevant as we get closer and closer into it, because, again, these are things that some people may say this could never happen, but it does actually happen. But I want to say it is incredibly heavy, but there are some parts that's a little bit funny because the spoken word part, what is what is learning?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was so weird because you have those moments, but it's funny being a poet, like, and being in open mics and doing those things. I'm like, okay, yeah, I believe that. Like, I've seen this guy, like, I've seen this open mic guy, I've seen this poetry. But yeah, it's funny because John Singleton puts in these moments of levity, whether on purpose or not, however it was, and it kind of like lulls you into like, oh, okay, and then he hits you with something really hard. I mean, things like he really does a good job of that in this movie. This was a super 90s film. I mean, this 90 was just like, this was like 90s all over the place. But I'm curious too, Jay, like, why this? I mean, you and I are both professors, we're both teachers, and I'm curious, like, why this film? When I reached out and I was like, oh, let's do this. Like, you were very like, let's do higher learning. Like, what is it about, even more deeply about like what this film does? And I'm really curious too. Have you screened this for your students, or have they ever watched this movie?
You know what? I haven't screened this one, but I plan on it now, looking back at it again. But I would say one of the things, because I do hip hop therapeutic writing, for the most part, I'm really looking at how do we heal? How do we use the power of writing to heal from historic traumas, family traumas, and that sort of thing. So, because I'm a strong believer, before we teach students like hard skills, like you need to know mathematics and networking and all of this stuff, we really have to get them to a place of being healed.
Yeah.
And what I see in higher learning is you have 3 freshmen that's coming in, and all of them have experienced some sort of trauma. With Malik, he's dealing with racial and historic traumas. With the character Remy, he is dealing with the trauma of poverty and living in a rural environment, and a lot of family work scripts. So I'm not trying to have my life in prison to a life of being a farmer and that sort of thing. So he's trying to escape that. And then you have Christy, for the most part, that she is dealing with gender trauma, and yet at the same time she's also dealing with, in a sense, a sort of recession, so to speak, within her own family. So for me, what stuck out to me is like, how many students do we have that have these traumas, and really at a university they're supposed to learn what it means to get the quote unquote good job. However, what we find is that most universities, they're not even teaching them how to be a human being. So, like, how do we function as everyday people, and if we can't figure that shit out, then we can't go out into the job market. So, because it's a lot of unhealed stuff, and these kids go through it. But I think one of the things that stick out to me is all of us are going through it, in a sense, because when you see the campus, one of the things that I love about the film, the opening shot, is you see this American flag. And then you see, I mean, this superimposed American flag, and then you see the band playing, right?
Mhm.
So really, this is what we think when we're going to the college, that this is going to be our thrust into the
Mm.
American dream.
Mm.
But what happens when that dream meets the gritty reality of that? It's a lot of people that haven't learned from history, haven't learned, and we're repeating the same cycles.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that hits you in the face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, like just the fact that they're like surrounding this like band and the salute that they're doing. Like
mhm.
they're
Yes.
obviously that was put in a certain way, right? To represent like when it's mob mentality right there. Like, right, we're open to, I'm like, what is going on in this college? Like, you know, and you're
Mhm.
seeing the salute and you know, it's obviously reminding you of, you know, Adolf Hitler's like salute.
Oh yeah.
Like very, I don't even say subtle. It's there. It's like, whoa, like, you know,
It
like,
is there.
okay, yeah, they're putting up like peace signs, but at the same time, they're doing a salute. Like, oh,
That's right.
let's all do this. And then I thought the great part of that whole beginning, it's like how judgy everyone is. Like
Mhm.
it's like, you know, even, you know, sexuality, like a black woman judging a white woman's sexuality and being like,
Yeah.
"Are you
Yes.
okay? Like, are you okay? Is everything
Yeah.
okay?" When she was like holding the woman's hand, and then just
Mhm.
the white woman in the elevator with the black man and kind of touching her purse, you
Yeah.
know, because that's where she comes from. But then she ends up having to be with you know, rooming with a black woman who's now also
Mhm.
judging her for being too rich because she came
Mhm.
from another class, and
Orange
there's just
County,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
there's so many things that are happening that it's like, oh, even in the cliques, there's cliques and
Yeah.
there's judgment and not understanding the other. And it's
That's
like
right.
Right.
it's the biggest thing is that everybody here just didn't want to, not that they didn't want to, it's just like they were just because they were in their clique, it was okay for them to also judge others. And it was like in the end,
Mhm.
like no one is trying to reach out to just like understand. And that it's like
No.
huge in
Yeah.
this, you know?
Yeah, you know what? And just one quick, just to add on to what you're saying, because at the beginning too, I think that flag is sort of trying to show like this, what's being perceived as uniformity, like we're
Mm.
all one.
Yeah.
But when you get down underneath the surface, it's that tribalism.
Oh
Everyone is
yeah.
staying in their own tribe,
Oh yeah.
and no one can break out of the tribe there, you know. And if it is, it's conflict. So yeah,
Yeah.
that definitely stuck out.
I mean, there's that scene where Fudge, Ice Cube, is he tells everyone what the lay of the land is. Basically, he's like, "That's Disneyland over there. That's like Chinatown. That's this. That's that." And you're just like, at first you might think like, "Oh, it's the '90s. That's the way that was only then." But I teach on a campus that I teach at USC. This is what
Mhm.
this it's like. This is how these cliques work. Like you see it out in front of you,
But
and that in itself already creates that like push and pull. So you see that right away in the movie. And that thing you said, Manny, too, about that salute, that is the USC victory sign. That they do that. So 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 when I saw that, I was just like,
again, causing
oh,
tribalism, right? Like,
but
because
you're
even
trying
now,
to
like you're
right.
you're in this tribe, so like if you went out to another college, that college is going against another college. Like
Exactly.
we're constantly
Yeah,
drawn to where we feel comfortable, right?
that's right.
So
Absolutely.
I mean, like tribes make sense in a way. Like we like to connect with people. It's easier to connect with someone that looks like you, acts like you, is into the same things as you, because
Yeah,
like, you know,
it's comfortable.
like being different is hard because you know you're being judged because you're judging also, you know, like
Yeah.
so it is tougher, but it's like having to break out of that, and you're supposed to have to do that in college, right? But yet,
Yeah.
like, it's crazy that this whole movie takes place in a college, and yet everybody was still, it was still hard.
Yeah,
It's
it's just a
still,
microcosm of the world. Like this is
yeah.
literally what it is. Yeah.
And so it's like, what then is, where do you break that?
Mm.
I
You
don't,
know, like,
you know what? That's going to be extremely hard because then you also have the generational warfare that's taking place between Professor Phibbs and his take on the younger generation. So
That's right.
it's funny. I did some like little trivia background on it. Like originally, Lawrence Fishburne character was supposed to be like Sidney Poitier,
Yes.
which probably would have shown even
Whoa.
better because with him being, West Indian and being from a baby boomer generation, and how is he looking at Generation X? But I think, he kind of gets to the point where you have this professor that's really having some conservative views and some views where he's not fully seeing the full humanity of Generation X as well. So, he's trying to say you have to work twice as hard and do all these things. But I was like, yeah, but where's the payoff in that? And so what I found with myself as a Generation Xer, it was like triggering. So, because it reminded me of that sort of mentality that they force down your throat if you're a Generation Xer, like you have to go to college because you have to have this better life. And in actuality, we're living with the lack of payoff.
Yeah.
It's a lack of payoff.
Yeah. I mean, this movie does a really good job of creating all those types of dynamics. And I feel like one thing that I found interesting on this rewatch was I guess maybe because of my age now too, watching it now, and also with all the experiences I've had, especially as a teacher and everything, especially Manny and I going back through all these other 90s things, and also just life experience, seeing the character of Remy and being like, oh, he got preyed on really well, that he was so desperate to needing to be belonging to something that he was willing to do the most notoriously gross, horrifying thing and debase himself to being an absolute racist when really he just wanted to go
He wanted to belong.
It was rough to watch that, because you're just like, I don't want to sympathize with something like that, but at the same time, this kid was,
I mean, he was being made
masculinity
fun
issues
of.
up and down, up and down. Yeah,
Bro, he was being made fun of by his own, right? Or he thought he was own. He was trying to get into the fraternities. He was trying so hard. Then he, his roommate that couldn't really stand him. And like, it's so easy to prey also like that group, that kind of group, extremist groups in all ethnicities, but especially in that group, we're going to prey on the weak. Like he needed a sense of belonging. So, these people are making me feel strong. These people will stand up for me. They're going to be there for me. Like, I may not believe them full-heartedly, but I now feel wanted. I feel like I feel like I could bring something to this group. And like that dude, that in the main guy, the older guy, who's like the cheap, like he's just like, yeah, you're gonna do this. Yeah, if you're gonna do it, let's just do it. Like he knew what he's doing. Like he's saying he's not gonna ever do the actual action. He just wants lackeys to do it because why wasn't he on the roof?
Right. You know what I would say, out of all the characters, I think one criticism that I have, which is many, like as we stated, potholes and that sort of thing in the film, but I would say this. I would say the other two freshmen, their stories weren't as fully developed as Remy. Like we saw a whole character arc. And really, I would say at the end, it was when he realized all of the damage. He really, even then, you kind of saw like he was just coming to his senses and realizing that I've gone too far. But then by that time, he just realized it was too late for him. And so, you really seen a full arc, because I mean, you got from the kid that was picked on by Busta Rhymes and Ice Cube to, which is funny. They're like drinking his water and all of that. I'm like, welcome kid to Hazen 101. And that sort of thing. But and I think he was really trying. I think he tried to fit in with Malik at first. I just think he just didn't really know how, and and this is why I say, what I wholly believe in, what I do, like I said, with therapeutic writing and that sort of thing, I'm believing in having my students to write and share their experiences in such a way that we can find some commonalities. But it seemed like the institution did nothing to foster those things. I'm like,
No.
it's nothing that the university is doing.
First of all, this university was crazy about this part in higher learning. I was like, I wrote this down in my notes. I'm like, one, campus security is a joke. And well, that's a whole other conversation. That's like 3 podcasts worth of conversations in reality of campus security. But at the same time, like, they were a joke. The institutional structure was a joke because, like, how do you not? Everyone's fighting on campus. Nothing is getting done. Like, people are getting beaten into the ground. There's like, man, they're in class the next day. That would never happen. and 2, like, it was weird. Like, after what happens at the end when, the shooting that happens with, Remy shoots 3 people on campus and Tyra Banks is one of the people that gets shot and then he kills himself. It's just like the next scene is like Malik in Lawrence Fishburne's office being like, so what's your choice? What are you going to do now? Like,
I was like,
graduation would be canceled. Like, graduation would be canceled. There would be no weird graduation thing. It would just be canceled. I mean, USC canceled graduation this year because of what was going on campus. They would never have a graduation ceremony. That was really weird. But yeah, it was that those were some of the moments that I was like, okay, like, we could have. Like,
well, I mean, again, there was like some drops, like plot holes or just like steep, like, that's it. Okay, we're gonna move on. I did. You heard right before he like ends his life. He's like, I wanted to build something. I wanted to be like. He like reverts to being that freshman that we were kind of feeling for. Like, you don't want to feel for this guy. He just killed 3 people, and like, but then you're like, oh man, he was a kid. Like, he's still growing up, and like he got, and which is, it's kind of like sad that somebody could easily be manipulated and not understand what they're actually doing because of rage and because of being hurt. Like, how blind did you get by hurt words, hurt feelings, hurt actions?
Yeah.
And you're just like, I don't care. I see red. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, now my life is like, where did he think that was going to go? Like, how was this going to end good at all? Like, he obviously, there was no thinking in the future because it's like, did he think he was going to get away with it? And then like, just live his life. Like, obviously there's no actual, and then you can say that about a lot of things, like that when people do such things, you're literally blinded by rage. Like, it's all that, and I definitely agree with you that his character arc was probably the deepest. And then, there was others that you were like, oh, I understand. This is a different movie almost, but then kind of drop because we want to get back to what's going to hit the crowd. Like, that scene makes this movie, oh my God. Like, we saw the scene of what we now see everywhere in the United States, in school shootings and stuff.
Yeah.
But we saw it on screen, so like that makes it powerful. And I definitely think this scene makes it, oh my God, did you see that movie? That movie was amazing. Right. Because if it was just about the sexual exploration and that just dropping, you're like, but could they have gone deeper?
Oh, I think so.
Like, I wanted to see more. Unfortunately, I wanted to see like more of like the backlash of like her mental state of being sexually assaulted. And then that guy being like, either not, like, we don't see him anymore. The guy who did it.
Billy? No.
Right?
No, Billy
you could also think like back then, they didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
It really shows like that rape culture. And one of the things that I thought that the movie did right was the angst of the young lady, like saying that if I tell someone, they're going to say, well, what was I doing alone in this room? And it's this whole sort of thing where as the woman, I have to prove that I am the victim, or otherwise I'm trying to ruin this young kid's life.
Yeah.
And, there is no sort of accountability placed on these young men and their acts of aggression and masculinity as well. So
Yeah.
if we even look at masculinity
Oh.
in this film, all over, it was a sort of masculinity to show a level of hardness, a propensity for violence, and that sort of thing. And that was with the black characters, the white characters, the supremacists, the white supremacists. All of this was like, I need to assert masculinity in a way that's going to show dominance.
Yeah.
And I would say that part right there, Singleton does a great job of showing how male dominance, it can sometimes, I would say toxic sort of male dominance is problematic. And even from the police officers, it's like this kid shot 3 students, the guy is going to fight, and then they still beat the one black.
That was I was blown. I was like, at this point, like, but we see that in the news all the time when like they take in a white perpetrator and they're someone who is a gun owner who's a black male, like is trying to get their gun license out and they get shot. So this is not like watching it now. You're maybe in the 90s. Depending, I think maybe in the 90s, and if you're a white audience and you're watching this, you might be like, wow, I can't believe that happened. But now, after years and years and 30 years or so more of this and kind of the reckoning, and I put quotes in that in 2020 because it was a short racial reckoning, and then here we are still with the way things racially are in the United States. But now as a white audience member, you see that and you're like, I can't believe that this is still happening. And that fight scene between Michael Rappaport and Omar Epps was so brilliantly staged that they're fighting in a stairwell, in being watched by a portrait of George Washington and Jefferson, two of the United States' worst slavers in history. Washington was one of the worst, if not the worst, and Jefferson obviously raped his slaves, had children, and still kept them in slavery. And you have this fight between these two characters, and you're just like, holy. And if you know that, like if you know those two things and you pay attention, you're just like the impact of that moment was just so much more now than like when I saw it the first time. I mean, that was brilliant scene.
Oh yeah. You know what? One of the things that I would probably say, if I'm looking at plot, like, because we got to talk about some of the plot holes in there.
Yeah, let's do it.
One plot hole I would say is the character fudge. Not really believable, okay? Because I don't know how many 6-year seniors are in the dorm room with freshmen. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, and you're majoring in what? And you're not. And then the one scene where it's like, oh, y'all go every time y'all hear a bell. I'm like, what bell do you have at a college university? I'm like, what is going on here? So, and then I didn't really understand his politics. So on one hand, it was like, okay, you need to read all these books and expand your mind and do all of these things. And let's go ahead and fight and have this violence. But after the fight, you're going to say, oh, but that means nothing. So his character, sometimes I'm like, where are we going?
His character was so contradicting of it in himself. And then like at the end of it all, he graduates and is just happy. Like he's like making fun of being part of the system.
Right.
But he's in it. Right. And he's even in it longer. Right, because he can be. He's saying like I'm taking advantage of the system. I assume that's like the character he's trying to play. Like, because like, could he afford to be there? Could he not? Does he have a scholarship? Does he have? Is he like using that role? Like, I agree. I was like, why is he? Is he just here because they wanted him? His character in there
because he was Ice Cube.
And like that's why they're like, oh, we need to put up like an iconic hip hop like artist in here, and like he's kind of the head of the gang, I guess. I don't know, like or the head of the group, the clique. You know, like what is he? And then like Busta Rhymes, his character was awesome. I have to say,
Crazy.
like that is like let's just make crazy faces and loud noises. All right, we're just gonna have Buster do it. Like, why?
It's great. I love
He's like, whoa, let's fight. Like, yes. I was like, there was some comedy or like some to make you kind of snap out of it for a second. Like I thought, and it's like, okay, we're still watching just a movie, and like it's exaggerated characters,
Yeah.
Like, remember PCU, the movie?
Oh, no, PCU.
You guys don't remember that?
No.
It's like PC University, whatchamacallit, with the guy who played the agent in Entourage. What the heck is his name?
Oh, Ari.
I know
Ari.
about. Yeah.
So it's a upcoming freshman comes in, and he's visiting a school, and it's like throwing every exaggerated group in schools, like the grungy hippie girl, gays, the this, the that, and like you go through every step. So basically PC, like, politically correct university, and everybody has a right to say anything.
Wow.
It kind of reminded me of, like, I don't know if it came out
94.
94.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was kind of like this had a little bit of that, except it got real serious. This, like, where PC was kind of like a comedy, if you will. It was kind of.
This reminded me also in 1995, Friday came out. So Ice Cube was in, he is also like, he has that movie came out in 1995 as well. So, I mean, he's in two huge movies at that point. But this also reminded me, Higher Learning had that 90s exaggeration and storytelling with the comedy and tragedy of things like SLC Punk. Like, if you ever watch SLC Punk, it ends in a gigantic tragedy. And yet every punk character is taken to an exaggerated level. Like, there's no way you could be that level of an anarchist and survive at all. Like, it's an impossibility. But I think that's the idea, right? And like Fudge's character is interesting because he's like the Van Wilder before there's Van Wilder, right? And you're like, how is he still in this college? He says he had Lawrence Fishburne as a professor maybe twice. I took his class maybe twice. And I'm just like, took his class twice. Like, how are you here still? Like, what is happening? But the people fall through the cracks in the university system, right? If you don't take a course and you have a few credits left, you can matriculate pretty much forever in many ways. Like, but his character is crazy because I think also like the dorm then itself just looked like a 1-bedroom apartment. And I was like, how do you get these apartment with these refrigerators?
Yeah.
They're just chilling in there.
Like, they had a massive party going on in that thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was looking at that, and definitely the dorms, the way he was talking to the police officers on the campus. I'm like, come on, man. I was like, let's be realistic. But I would say this, he was also the ultimate hustler, because apparently at this university, there is no one that has a printer or a computer but Ice Cube. And so everyone has to come over to his house and write, and he charges them like 10 cents per sheet of paper. I'm like, what is going on here?
That is genius, because I've told students when I ask them to print something like the one time a semester, I'm like, please find a printer that works, and they can never do it. And I'm like, one of you needs to buy a printer and just be the printer for that hallway or something in your dorm, and no one ever does it. And you know what? That was the right thing to do. It was amazing. That was great. That was good. Lawrence Fishburne, I love him, and he's always been Morpheus. I feel like I'm watching him in this movie, and I'm like, he's Morpheus then, and he's Morpheus. Like, just the way he like delivers his knowledge. Can you smoke a pipe in a building in the 90s?
I guess you could. I mean, you could smoke cigarettes everywhere, right? In the 90s,
not in the 90s, you couldn't do that.
Yeah, I don't think you could smoke a pipe. I mean, you know what? I think it was more. Yeah, you know what?
I think pipes are allowed anywhere. It makes you distinguish and smart.
Yeah, but you know what I didn't like? Why was the professor like? Why were they all in cubicles? I'm like, what is this? I was like, we're all in cubicles.
I've seen that before. Where I went to school at St. John's University, in Jamaica, Queens. Shout out to all the people that went out to St. John's and all my classmates and my professors. The English department didn't have their own offices. They were in the basement in cubicles, just like that. And it was crazy. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, like that makes sense to me. Like I've seen this before. But that just also to me looked like, yeah, this school has money. They're going to give it to certain places and certain departments, and others, sit in cubicles. And like,
Yeah.
that's why that shot to that other professor talking was so interesting, because it was like he made a direct shot to them while they were talking, like Malik and Lawrence Fishburne's character and Omar Epps, and then like, just let me shoot this other professor here, in just to show that we're not alone in this office.
Right.
It was really weird. Yeah, it was really very
yeah,
weird.
that part was very weird. It did not make sense to me. But now that you say about the cubicle, well, maybe they had it right,
It's
So
very real. Yeah.
Now, one part that I would say, this is where the generational warfare and a plot hole is coming in. When he has Malik read all the students who haven't paid their financial aid.
Never.
And I'm like, okay, but I thought it was an important part.
Yeah.
Back in 95, they showed just how expensive college was then.
Yeah.
Think about it now. And he was like, that. And then what I didn't like is his conservative tone, where he said there would be no handouts here and that sort of thing. And I'm like, you're having all of this being read in front. And then the other part that I thought was fake was when Malik, how did you not know that you're on a partial scholarship? I was like, those are things that right away.
And like when they
up on you,
and then when they like have to go to that office, and she's like, "Get a job." Like the people behind the thing, I was like,
"Yo,
this didn't happen like that. That's not. Right. You didn't just like pay with a credit card. Like this was all planned out beforehand. Exactly. Like, what are you doing here?" And like.
Yeah. Go ahead, man.
Even that though, that storyline about his partial scholarship, and then like getting into being like, oh, you're you're still running for your money. You're like, and playing that part where it's like, oh, only black students get in because of scholarships, and like playing that stereotype. And then you were talking about like the male masculinity in this, the fight in between all the people in that team also, like they were like, it's like athletes being athletes, and like, oh, you're slacking, you're ruining our thing, because he's so busy going, why the hell did I do this? Like I came here, like I'm running, like I want more to life than this. And then that was an interesting thing going on there too. But yeah, back to the scholarship, you would have known, like, it's
100%.
Exactly.
Like,
100%.
Exactly. And that's why I felt like Malik's character wasn't fully developed. I think I would have liked for him to really dive deeper into what it's like if you are a college athlete and you're trying to fight the stereotype and you're trying to keep your grades up. But one thing that they did show, and I guess because I'm an English professor and that sort of thing, was the problems with writing. So I'm like, where in the hell did Malik go to school? But then I said, I have students like this. So it lets you know that the students that you get are they're not coming prepared for this environment. So Malik gets in as an athlete, but can he function as a human being there again in the same way as Remy and that sort of thing? So I'm like, there has to be something embedded within the education that really is talking about how do we educate you on being a human being. And what's one of the major complaints that we have about schools now? Schools don't teach life skills. It's like, I'm going to teach this geometry, but how do I manage a bank account? How do I manage stress? How do I manage any of those things? And it's like the schools are fixated so much on hard skills that we forget these kids got to learn what it is to live. And that part is missing in the film altogether.
When I watched that part, especially the way, like in the office hours, as he's talking to Christy Swanson and everyone about like their papers, and I'm like, man, these are the conversations I have with students where I'm just like, that's great, but like you have to say something. You have to that I thought like, what is your perspective? What do you bring to the conversation? And that idea that these first year students have so much trouble doing that. And I'm like, that is so real still. Like in the writing, what I thought though, one of the parts I thought was interesting about the way when Tyra Banks is tutoring Omar Epps, there are things that she said about like there's a formula to write an essay and all these things. I'm like, yeah, in rhetoric, that's changed. Like you could see also in rec comp like changes as well in the teaching of writing. I'm like, now we don't. Well, some teachers still do that, but I would say like there's a movement in rhetoric to kind of move past this idea and like we're like Dr. Vershana Shanti Young's articles, like should writers use their own English and that like code meshing of languages and grammars and everything. And, that to me, like I was getting in my like teaching nerd bag being like, wow, this is like, we don't do this anymore. But you could see how like there are still professors that do that. Like do the formulaic thing. Let's get you in and out of here. Let's get you out of here. That's what's interesting, because that's still very much part of the college experience, I would say. Like, it really depends on who you have.
You know what? I do applaud him. The Maurice Tips. I applaud Maurice Tips for trying to challenge the students to think. However, his approach was it's such a baby. You know what? It's such a baby boomer approach.
Yeah.
It made me feel like I was watching The Breakfast Club. In a sense, like I'm going to break you, and that's the thing. And you know what? And you cannot teach in that way now. If you try to teach a Zoomer with that, I'm going to break your spirit and build you up, you will lose now. That is one thing that died with Generation X. You cannot, I think, or Generation X for the most part dealt with, I have to prove who I am to you and gain acceptance. You try that stuff with Gen Z now, you're getting reported. It's there's no way you're going to pull that off now.
If you would have done, if we would have done what he did and have, like I said, like you said, like have Malik read the names of those who's like, all you owe money, now you got to leave. Dude, no way you could do that. You send an email or you teach the class. I remember seeing that and I'm watching, I'm like, oh, you can't do that. Like, you can't do that shit. I want to talk about a character real quick too that totally disappears. And that's Wayne. Like Malik's roommate.
Yes.
First of all, great actor.
Come back?
Sort of.
Come back? Because doesn't he hook up with what's her name? And
they have that weird edited sex scene.
Sex scene with the girl. You think she's having sex. She's having sex with both of them at some time. They're not together. But then like there's the whole scene that like he does get the condom. So it's like, oh great, he gets the condom. Like that's what did it, like. But then he's like at the end, like he's in a big part of saying goodbye to Malika, or like saying like, hey, I was never an enemy, like I was an ally, and like I wanted to be your friend, and like you were closed off because you were going through your own shit of fitting in. Exactly. Like this dude was like just kind of like truly, I don't want to be stereotypical like California, like, yeah, man, like I'm just kind of living life, and like I don't know why everybody hates me. Like I'm just kind of, he's neutral. That guy was like,
well, him and Jennifer Connelly both, they're there, but then they're not there anymore. Like they're these two weird catalytic characters, and I have to say, I applaud the late great John Singleton for having a movie with a prominent condom shot, because that you don't see that in a lot of movies before a sex scene or during a sex scene or in shows, right? Like, hey, here it is. Like,
true, because like that should be, you
don't see that ever.
Especially, it's crazy. It's funny because like I always say, like the biggest advertisers of guns is Hollywood, right? Which is a strong statement considering I love action movies, right? But it glorifies blowing up, action, killing, and all that stuff, right? And then there's always that like video where it was around for a little while, and I think you see it every once in a while in a meme, where a dad or a mom watching a movie with kids and there's like gun violence going on and they're just watching, and then like a tit or something comes on and they cover their face because nudity is like whatever, right? And it's like, so you're ashamed to show that, and then you wonder why they don't the kids don't know how to handle sexual exploration. They don't know how to handle sexual, like they don't know how to say no, say yes, say what they're comfortable, say what they're not. Use safe sex practices because you're scared to show it, but you're totally fine showing violence.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
important in terms
And that
of
it's
like,
okay.
yeah, and it's important in terms of the conversation too, where we've all been having this like going back and forth to masculinity and the ideas of the the toxicity that the masculinity in this movie, like in those issues that the young men have, where like Wayne, he stops to do that, to get up, take a condom out of his pocket. I mean, you only see that. I think the only other movie I think I remember seeing that is in the movie Train Spotting, where the girl throws a condom at Ewan McGregor, and we know that that's now part of it. There's another complication of that sex scene though.
Like in the movie with Brendan Fraser, where he's in college, and what's his name's a Harvard bum. Shit, what is it? They have a bowl of condoms that they grab before they go out. So it's crazy that I'm remembering now, like you're bringing like condom scenes. Like it's very quick and like very few. And like I remember that one. I forget the name of that movie, but he loses a paper, and what's his name is Joe Pesci, I think. Was Joe Pesci a Harvard bum?
Robin Williams.
No, it's not Robin Williams. Not
I'll look it up.
That's Good Will Hunting. Like,
I'm thinking about another movie with a Boys in the Hood.
Yes.
When Trey is having sex with Neil the first time, you see the condom, that wrapper that's on like the little nightstand and that sort of thing. So John Singleton is making sure that people are safe with condoms in this movie. But I will say this one thing that I like about Wayne and Jennifer Connelly characters. I think these were the two models that Singleton was showing, like, this is what emotional intelligence looks like. They knew who they were. They were comfortable in their own skin. Like, I like the way that he talked to Malik and said, hey, I'm not a white supremacist. Look, you know me. We may have different tastes in music and that sort of thing. And it even got to the point where Malik was like, you know what? You're right. You weren't different. But I'm just so angry right now. Yeah. Again, we didn't really see much. I wish it could have fleshed out Malik's character a little bit more to see some of this growth in there. That would have been quite interesting to see how that would have went. Because even at the end, I'm still a little confused. It's like, okay, so now you run at the end. Yeah. And I'm like, so what does this mean? Are you gonna bury your head and just be an athlete now? Or does this mean that you're running for yourself? What does that mean, in there? And then one last thing I would say with Professor Tibbs, it kind of bothered me that, now that your girlfriend has died and been murdered, now you should snatch the pebble out of my hand. What it is to be an adult. I'm like, is this the life lesson you wanted? It's like you have shitted on this man throughout 3/4 of this movie. Yeah. But when his girlfriend dies, who you are yelling at, go and get help in the middle of gun. You're like, now you get it. This is what it's like to be American.
That was so weird. And I'm just like, that was the odd part. And I feel like, I think also though, the thing that I felt it was missing too was a narrative of, well, and maybe John Singleton, like, this was on purpose, like this wasn't what the movie was, but like you have an actress like Regina King in the film. You have this conversation also that Malik has with Tyra Banks when he says it's safe for you as a woman, and I'm like, like you're not, as a black woman, not even you just had a woman get raped in the beginning of the film, so we know that's a falsity. Two, she's a black woman, and like that ups the game for her being unsafe. There's no conversations about that at all in the movie. Regina King is kind of just I don't want to say just
Yeah.
there, but she is like, she's just
Yes.
kind of, and it would have been nice to have a little more there for
I
her
think
to work
I think at the
work with.
time that wasn't a conversation,
Mm,
right? That was even a more silent talk,
yeah,
just like the
well,
bisexuality talk, right?
Mhm.
yeah,
It's kind of wasn't, it was like um just not spoken about, you
yeah,
know, and maybe I don't know if it was done by design. I think it was just done by like what he knew, or you know,
yeah,
like, or how he's used to certain things. And it's
true.
like now you speak about it, it's like, wait, you know, that there's another section of a section that we have not talked about that also feels unsafe for both the fact that they're a person of color and female,
Yeah.
you
Mm,
Yeah.
know, where, you know, uh, where's that? Where do they stand? Where was there? Because that wasn't really a topic. Like we didn't. There was not even a character building of that. You know,
no.
like it was just kind of you're just in the background. You're like you're there because we needed
Yeah.
you there to show characters. But like you're like, why couldn't that have been
Yeah.
another story to
Mm,
follow? You know,
yeah.
they
Well,
shot that down quick when she's like when he said like, "Oh, you're a woman, so you're safe." Like, oh, okay, so we're not even going to talk about being a black woman
he kind of
in
makes
that
Tyler
era.
makes a cursory mention, like, oh,
Yeah,
when something comes up missing, but I'm like, it's a little bit more than that. And I would say the Regina character, I want to say, was there to she gave me a lot of stereotypical black woman is going to be the sort of nanny character
Mm,
for the white girl too, because oh, what's wrong, Christine? But and that sort of thing, and calling her friends to take up for her, and you know what? As I was watching the movie, I said this is an interesting scene here because I'm like, so how does this character deal with the fact that you had these group of black men that came up and you brought them to the frat house?
yeah.
And I'm like, wouldn't that get you sort of ostracized from your community because you're going to this outsider group that you brought them there and they made Billy apologize to Queen Black Black
Yeah.
Mother Queen. I'm like, how does this play out here? And they kind of left it alone. It's like, oh, I'm going to go with my bisexual community and it's over. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. So they didn't develop the aftermath of what that would be.
They didn't. You have it in the beginning when like Veronica Vaughn from Billy Madison, the actress who played her, and her friend, just two caricatures of like, you know, college girls in college, and then that don't also that are making fun of their friend for not having money, who, for, and then that was it. And then they go away. And so there are a lot
but
of
they played the
drop-offs.
stereotypical, oh, we're drunk, we make fun of people, like they made fun of her hair, like she changed
Yeah.
her hair too for no reason, and then like that story went away and her hair was back to normal within like
A
one
scene or
cut.
two. Yeah.
Yeah, a scene or two, but like which also plays into the fact that there is a thing about like when you change your hair, like you're moving on, being a new person.
Yeah.
Like, and she did that twice because she went through two stages of life after being raped.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, they did like the typical white, rich, I have no care in the world, I'm drunk
Hmm.
girl, and that kind of went away. Like it was like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, like
Yeah.
which I mean, there are
Total.
certain people in colleges that just kind of just get by, and they get by fine, and
Mhm. Yeah.
there's no they're just kind of background characters, you
Yeah.
know, which I guess
Yeah.
they needed. But yeah, it was an interesting thing. I mean, I guess you wanted it, they wanted to show as many different characters that you can have in college. Like if you look at the preview, it's like, you know, was it 30 something nationalities, 1,800 students, you know, six races, two sexes, one campus, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I was like, wow,
and,
what
and
is
then I'm
it?
like, what six races are we looking at? Because you really only saw two. Like, yes,
Right.
the
Mainly.
other ones were
Yeah.
really quick, right? Like
Yeah.
they could have dove into like being an Asian American in here, being an Indian American in here. Like Nowadays, you could probably the movie would be 4 hours long, because
Right.
of
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
more has changed since the 90s. Like, yeah, we're not going to talk about Muslims in this movie. We're not going to, like, there's,
Very good point.
we're not going to talk about being Jewish in this movie. We're just going to go with, which, I mean, I
They
guess
sort of
then
did the one character maybe,
Yeah,
they
the
but
one.
like
did. They
Yeah.
did.
But
it
it
was
was
Right.
very quick though, and he was like,
Very.
you're Jewish, and it kind of mentioned the friction historically between African American and Jewish communities, but it was very quick, and but I will say this one part that probably wasn't meant to be funny, but it was funny when he was like, "You just nothing but a white boy with a fucked up haircut." And I thought that was hilarious. And I was like, I was like, wow,
wow,
that's funny.
yeah.
I was
They were such like, and yeah, these are like, before we even put this to the test, because I really want to touch on the idea, like I was so confused that like, were the neo-Nazi characters students? Were they living on
No.
campus?
I don't think they were.
That's why I think the campus series is terrible. These people just hanging out. I think they're
Like,
preying.
I was
I think
like,
they prey on this, right? It's kind of showing you that, like, okay, this is where we're going to recruit, right? Have
that
you ever
was
seen American
crazy.
History X? Like,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like,
that's
let's
true.
recruit in high school, let's recruit in college. Like, let's get these kids, let's get these guys that feel, they're nothing, people hanging out by
Yeah.
themselves, and let's recruit. Because I didn't see them go to school. They were
No.
always hanging out at that dude's
Yeah.
house, you know,
Yeah. Scott.
and
Yeah,
just
Scott.
working out,
Scott.
you
Yeah.
know. But it's nuts. Like, even what's his name said, like, oh, my dad was a prepper or a
He was a survivalist.
right? And like,
Yeah.
you hear that about a lot of that now. I never
Yeah.
heard that in the 90s. Like,
No.
that wasn't in our culture here,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you
Unless he
talking
was
about?
preparing for Y2K, because we did have some kind of crazy character
True.
that was like, oh, year 2000, people were building bunkers and all of that kind of stuff, which is kind of crazy,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. So maybe he was preparing ahead of time.
Yeah.
I just had a feeling that Remy's character, again, if we could have got some flashbacks of their life before entering the university, probably would have been a little bit helpful too.
Yeah, he would have been, you knew that there was a lot of like, there's a lot of father-son issues and masculinity problems in terms of like his character. Like, it was just very prevalent. Like, you could tell. But it's funny because originally the John Singleton wanted to have Leonardo DiCaprio play the character of Remy, and then and Michael Rappaport was supposed to be Scott. Once Leonardo DiCaprio, I think, couldn't do it or whatever, and then they cast Cole Hauser, they put Rappaport in as Remy. I don't know if I could have seen a Leonardo DiCaprio as Remy. That would have been very difficult to kind of really see. Michael Rappaport was perfect for this part.
I think this is his only best role.
Well, and now with the way what happened to him in the public,
I mean, it's nuts.
reality,
He hasn't learned.
it makes
No.
there's like I'm like, oh, okay, like, okay. It's like,
Yeah.
It's funny you said it, because every time I see him, I still say Remy.
yeah.
It's like, it's Remy. And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Rappaport, he's Jewish, right? I think he's Jewish.
Yes.
And I remember him one time talking about how hard it was for him to play that particular role too.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, he had to do a bunch of stuff. I mean, it was very difficult. I feel for anyone. Before we do anything, is there anything else that we'd like to talk? Like, I mean, there's so much that we could keep going on as well, like, and keep digging into. But are there any particular scenes or moments or characters or things that we want that we didn't, that you'd like to touch on, Manny, JL?
I want to say that the camera work in this movie is fantastic. Yeah, there's plot holes. Some of it is cheesy. I think like it was all by design, the way the camera's angles were when certain scenes came on, when they walk into a room, to be like very like forceful, like, and they made the guys look very tall. Everything was done really cool. So I got to give it up to the cinematographer, and just art design in this was fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I would say soundtrack. It's
Oh.
very 90s on the soundtrack. You know, whether it's the grunge music or the hip hop music or the Al Green and all of these, I just thought they were spot on with all the music selection that really kind of captured everything. And I don't know if you guys paid attention to the end. Ice Cube summarized the whole movie with his rap at the end of the
I didn't see.
and
I
when the
didn't hear.
credits is going on, which is like it remind me of classic Ice Cube. So
Wow. I was gonna say too, like the soundtrack to this movie was masterful. I was like so blown away, and also when you look at some of the trivia too, when you look at some of the facts of the movie, the scene, the sexual assault scene, that song by Tori Amos is a song about her experience being assaulted as well. So there were very specifically chosen songs. I mean, again, but that's you're watching John Singleton and off of Boys in the Hood, like you not expect it, but it's part of the experience, the watching experience of the movie. Like you could tell when the movie has a really bad soundtrack, it is really difficult to watch. When we did Point Break, there's like no music. I mean, there's like zero soundtrack, and you're just like they couldn't get one. I mean, the Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is in the movie. You couldn't get one Chili Pepper song, but like, but when a movie has a soundtrack that tells the story as well and is part of the underlying narrative of the movie, like Higher Learning or like Boys in the Hood, and everyone has their music, it totally amplifies everything that's happening. And I thought that was like a super well developed part of the movie. But
yeah, it was super dope. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean here we're at that part of the podcast now where we put Higher Learning to the ultimate test, to the nostalgia test. And if this is your first time listening, basically it's like if it passes the nostalgia test, that means that this movie stands up to the test of time. It is still good. It is a movie that you would recommend. It is a movie that you would tell people to watch, which means recommend, Dan. Very good. But it's a movie that you would watch intentionally. If it fails, and is just nostalgic, that means like it's not that it's bad, it's just something that I would not go out of my way to watch, but it gives me those nostalgic 90s feelings, as feelings for a John Singleton movie in that moment. And if it's on, I might watch some of it or whatever. But if it fails, and it fails terribly, it's something that I will never watch again, or will never eat again, like the Three Musketeers bar, or like Airheads. I will never watch Airheads ever again. There's no reason to ever watch it. But yeah, that's how it goes. So why don't JL, if you want to start us off, like, do you believe that Higher Learning passes the nostalgia test?
I would say yeah, only because so many of the themes are still relevant. And it seemed like a lot of it was ahead of its time, considering that in particular, the way the movie ends, we didn't really have it really widely known at school shootings at the way it, I mean, this is as I stated before, this is 4 years before Columbine.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, as Manny stated earlier, it shows how much we haven't unlearned. So it's nostalgic, but it's nostalgic in a sense for all the bad reasons, like the stuff that this intergenerational trauma. We should be able to look back and say, "Oh man, this is so nostalgic because it was in the past."
Yes.
And you look at it, but it's nostalgic in a different way because it shows how much we haven't unlearned. So I would say it to me, it passed the nostalgia test.
All right, Manny, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's definitely a must watch, even though if you stick through here, we spoiled it right in the beginning. I think you should just go back. People should watch it. I mean, it's weird. I run into a tug of war with myself when I say like, oh, you should know about history because you learn from it. But like we don't. Unfortunately, we don't. Scars heal. People forget. We move on and we repeat mistakes because we're all insane. Because you would think you're right. You would think we would see this and be like, by now. Okay, that was 94. by now that we would be like, man, that was some crazy past, and like, damn, that thank God that doesn't happen anymore. And it actually just got worse. So yeah, but it still passes. I think it definitely should be a watch, and it is a great, just a great movie and a great like video film experience.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you. I think Higher Learning passes the nostalgia test. It is a movie that when I watched it back, I was blown away by how John Singleton just went there with a lot of these scenes. I mean, he didn't pull back. He didn't, from the violence, from the rhetoric, from the dialogue, from the sexual, even the sexual assault scene, as painful it was to watch. This is something that students experience. The whole scene, Jennifer Connelly even talking about how many women experience sexual assault on college campus. This is something that happened a couple of years ago again, and happens all the time in college campuses. And at USC, there was a whole, I don't even want to call it scandal. There was a whole issue there with the Sigma Nu fraternity where there was a huge protest at USC, and they nothing really happened except for the Greek life disassociated from USC and still exists. So even the protections that these like fraternities and these institutional spaces have, John Singleton nails it, very well. And so it definitely passes. I think if I want to pair something, I'm just now being a professor for a second to with this too. It's like I would also think about read, like sometimes there are two things that I think go well with this. In terms of masculinity, I would read Bell Hooks's book The Will to Change, which I think is such an unbelievable text. And if you don't want to read all of Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, definitely read chapter 2, where it talks about how we are educated and the idea versus being educated versus learning or knowledge, right? So this idea that you are just forced to learn things that are only making you more obedient instead of critical thinkers, right? So that I'm going to put those in the show notes. So
Yeah, I would probably say, to add on to that list, I would probably add on We Real Cool, just by the text by Bell Hooks, to talk about Black masculinity, which in a sense talks about American masculinity and homophobia and that sort of thing. And I would probably say a book that could be used to unlearn some of this is Dr. Chris Emdin. He has a book called Ratchetdemic, which is really talking about the ways that we should think about revolutionizing the education system in a way that it's not a one size fits all, and that we try to educate the whole person as opposed to just, teaching them just the hard skills.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, that's what I would say for that. But yeah, this was really super dope, man.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to really get to really, really super quick. It was, to me, this is like John Singleton remind me the most of Spike Lee in this particular film right here. I think this is his Spike Lee moment. It reminds me a lot of Do the Right Thing, and that sort of thing. So it was cool to see it from the West, because Spike Lee gave you a very New York movie. This one was a very West Coast movie.
Oh, yeah.
Very West Coast.
Super West Coast. Yeah, absolutely. But this was so much fun. JL, thank you so much for being on, for coming on to talk about higher learning, and for adding so much depth to it. This was, if you enjoyed this conversation, definitely hit the like right now and leave a comment. But why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about, where they can find you, how they can follow you, and some of the things that you do. And everyone definitely, when you hear it, definitely follow JL everywhere he's telling you. And I'll put everything in the show notes as well.
Oh, okay. So my name again is Dr. J.L. Adolph, better known as the Excellent Professor of Dad Cypher Edutainment. You can find me on all your social media platforms. Just look up Dad Cypher. That's CYPHER, Dad Cypher, like your mom and dad, that sort of thing. And also, I would say that check out my new website at Dad Cypher Edutainment, where I give educators. I give them some tips, and I'm offering online classes and that sort of thing that really show how we could go about revolutionizing our education system by helping these students to unlearn some of these traumas that they have, so they not only they can be better students and future people, but be just better human beings.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, everyone check it out because I was looking through your website. It's super amazing. Everyone's got to check it out. The courses, just everything. And you're really active on LinkedIn. And it's funny, we just released an episode with Matt Nuccio, who's a toy developer who developed Tickle Me Elmo and a lot of different other toys. And he was talking about how, LinkedIn is like this place that he didn't think was like a place
be a little cheesy in it.
But he loves it, and I've been like looking at your content on LinkedIn is awesome, and your content online. So everyone follow. I'll put all of JL's links in the show notes and in his bio and everything. And everyone, if you like this, please subscribe, give us a good rating. And you could screenshot a rating and review of this show, and we will send you a digital print of a quote from this particular episode. And if you signed up with the newsletter, you always now get a free digital print of a quote from the episode that comes out. So definitely join the newsletter. It's on the website. Hit us up. If you want to book us on your podcast, you could book us in the contact and booking part of the website. And I don't know if you want us to host anything, you want parties, theme parties. We were talking about Fifth Element parties.
We'll go a little bit more jokey next time.
Yeah. But yeah, we have to have you back on too, JL.
Yeah.
Do something else.
I want to have you on for some sort of 90. So we do music on this also. Like, so we don't hang out just at movies. We put on some albums to the test. So
we've been talking about early on in the podcast. We talked about doing The Last Dragon, and we haven't gotten to
my
yet.
God, that movie is crazy. I was just thinking about that movie.
Crazy.
That movie is nuts.
With doing that, and I don't know where Half Baked falls on there, but
I think that's the 90s. Is that 2000s or 90s? I mean, we do other ones. We're just focused in the 90s this year. We jumped on the 90s train. But I think Half Baked is that, they're coming out with another one, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah, I know. I don't even want to get into it.
I think it's crazy because
sequels and reboots gotta stop.
I just think I think it's interesting for Half Baked because it's legal now, right? In most.
What are they going to talk about? Delta 8?
You've kind of lost there was like something about Half Baked because I remember they were selling medical marijuana. So it's like now it's like, well, there's recreational marijuana everywhere. So I want to know like what's the joke? Where are the jokes? So
unless they're trying to do detox. Now that would be funny. Like, who are these guys as parents now? And are they trying to detox?
Okay,
it's going to be like
they're just smoking CBD instead because it's like the weeds are way too strong now.
That's the nostalgia. CBD is the nostalgic weed, and now
Dan texted me that he's like
acid.
Yeah, he's like, dude, weed now is just insane.
See, I knew we'd get a tangent. Somewhere. I knew it. Awesome. Everybody, see you in the next test. Definitely. Thank you again so much, JL. And everyone, tell us what you think. Higher learning. Everyone, see you at the next test. Peace.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please subscribe to the Nostalgia Test podcast to know when new episodes drop. Don't forget to leave us 5 stars and a positive review so more people can find the podcast. Share your thoughts and memories on today's topic on our Twitter @NostalgiaTest and on Instagram @TheNostalgiaTest. Tune in next time because you never know what pop culture will pop up on The Nostalgia Test.